Welcome back to Luna Chapters, where powerful women rewrite their destiny one revenge plot at a time. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving into a story that will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about second chances and silver bullets. Before we begin, smash that subscribe button if you love stories where the rejected become the rejecter, and don't forget to comment below with your favorite revenge moment. Trust me, you'll have plenty to choose from. What would you do if the man who shattered your heart in front of hundreds came crawling back 10 years later? Not for love, not for forgiveness, but because you've become the only person standing between his pack and extinction? Tonight's story is The Rejected Luna's Silver Revenge, and darling, this isn't just about getting even. This is about getting everything. So grab your wine, dim the lights, and let's watch an Omega become an Empress. Chapter 1. Blood Moon Humiliation. 10 years ago, Seraphina Vale was 18, invisible, and desperately in love with a boy who barely knew her name. Tonight, she was about to discover that sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. The Blood Moon Ball was the night every unmated werewolf dreamed of when the ancient magic revealed true mates through the sacred bondstones. Sera stood at the back of the Iron Ridge Pack's ceremonial hall, her mother's borrowed dress hanging loose on her small frame, watching as couple after couple found their destiny. She wasn't expecting much. Plain, bookish Sera had spent her entire life being overlooked. Her wolf was weak, barely able to shift, and she had the unfortunate habit of stammering whenever anyone important looked her way. But the moon had other plans. Seraphina Vale. The elder's voice boomed across the hall. Every head turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Sera's heart hammered against her ribs as she walked forward on shaking legs, her worn flats silent against the marble floor. The bondstone glowed in the elder's palm, a piece of ancient crystal that would reveal her mate's identity. Sera reached for it with trembling fingers, and the moment her skin made contact, the stone blazed with silver fire. The crowd gasped. Silver meant alpha. Silver meant power. Silver meant Alpha Kian Voss, the elder announced, his voice heavy with surprise. Sera's world tilted. Kian Voss, 6'4" of pure dominance, with storm gray eyes and a jaw that could cut glass. The future pack leader, already legendary at 22 for his strength and ruthlessness. Every she-wolf in 3 territories had been vying for his attention, and the moon had chosen her. Kian stepped forward, his presence commanding absolute silence. He looked at Sera for a long moment, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Hope bloomed in her chest like a fragile flower. Then his lip curled in disgust. No. The single word hit Sera like a physical blow. I reject this bond, Kian announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. She's too weak, too plain. An alpha needs a mate who can stand beside him, not cower behind him. He took the bondstone from her numb fingers and crushed it in his palm. The silver light died instantly, and with it, something inside Sera's chest shattered beyond repair. The crowd erupted. Some gasped in shock, others laughed, but most just stared at the pathetic girl who'd been publicly humiliated by the most powerful wolf in the territory. Sera's mother sobbed from the audience, but Sera herself felt oddly detached. She looked down at the crystal dust in Kian's palm, all that remained of what should have been their sacred bond, and something cold and hard settled in her chest. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the hall. Behind her, the whispers grew louder, crueler. Asterisk, poor little Sera. Did she really think she had a chance? Thank the goddess the Alpha had sense enough to reject her. Asterisk. She made it to the forest before the shock wore off and the pain hit her like a tidal wave. Sera collapsed against an oak tree, her mother's dress tearing on the bark, and wept until her throat was raw. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled her father's hunting knife from her boot and sawed off her long brown hair in jagged chunks. Each strand that fell felt like shedding her old skin. I'll never be powerless again, she whispered to the moon, her voice stronger than it had ever been. Never. And darling, if you think this is just another sad rejection story, you clearly haven't been paying attention. Because sometimes, when a wolf loses everything, she discovers she's actually a dragon in disguise. Chapter 2: Phoenix Rising. 10 years later, the headline in Forbes read, "From Outcast to Oracle, How Seraphina Vale Built a Billion-Dollar Empire from Silver and Spite." Sera, she'd legally changed her name, shedding even that last connection to her old life, stood in her corner office on the 50th floor of the Argent Tower, looking down at the city she now owned a significant piece of. The scared 18-year-old who'd fled the Blood Moon Ball was gone, replaced by a woman who commanded respect through intelligence, ruthlessness, and the kind of quiet power that made grown men step aside when she walked into a room. Her company, Argent Armory, held the patent on nano-silver ammunition, the only bullets proven to kill rogue shifters without harming humans. It was a technology that had revolutionized supernatural law enforcement and made her richer than some small countries. And if the bullets happened to work just as effectively on werewolves, well, that was just good business sense. Her assistant knocked and entered without waiting for permission, one of the few people brave enough to do so. "Ma'am, the quarterly reports are ready for your review. Also, your mother called again." Sera didn't look up from her computer. "Handle the reports. As for my mother, I believe I was clear about contact with my old pack." "Yes, ma'am, but she seemed urgent. Something about hunters and—" "I don't care if Iron Ridge is burning to the ground," Sera said coldly. "They made their choice about me 10 years ago. I've made mine about them." But even as she said it, something twisted in her chest. She'd spent a decade building walls around her heart, but apparently, some connections ran deeper than revenge. Oh, but sweet revenge was coming. Because sometimes the universe has a sense of poetic justice, and sometimes it just likes to watch powerful men grovel. Chapter 3: Desperation Calls. 300 miles away, Alpha Kian Voss stood in what remained of his pack's eastern border, surveying the devastation with grim eyes. 12 wolves dead in the past month. 15 more wounded by weapons that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. The hunters weren't playing by the old rules anymore. Alpha, his beta, Marcus, approached with a tablet in hand. Intelligence reports the human militia acquired military-grade silver ammunition. Our healers can't extract it. It's bonded at the molecular level. Kian's jaw clenched. Traditional silver bullets were bad enough, but these new ones, they were specifically designed to be lethal to his kind. Source: Argent Armory. They hold exclusive patents on the technology. The name hit Kian like ice water. He knew that company, knew it by reputation as the most innovative weapons manufacturer in the supernatural world. But he'd never connected it to run the CEO's profile. Marcus swiped through screens, then froze. "Alpha, you need to see this." The tablet showed a professional headshot that made Kian's wolf pace restlessly in his chest. Seraphina Vale, now going simply by Sera, looked nothing like the frightened girl he'd rejected a decade ago. Her brown hair was now a rich chocolate, cut in a sleek bob that framed high cheekbones and full lips. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were the same warm amber, but now they held a confidence that made his mouth go dry. This wasn't the cowering Omega he remembered. This was a predator in designer clothes. "Net worth?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. 1.4 billion and climbing. She revolutionized supernatural weaponry, Alpha. Those bullets killing our pack, she invented them. The irony wasn't lost on him. The weak little wolf he deemed unworthy was now the most powerful person in the room, and she held his pack's survival in her manicured hands. "Set up a meeting," Kian ordered. Marcus hesitated. "Alpha, given your history." "Set it up," Kian repeated, steel in his voice. "Whatever she wants, we pay it. Iron Ridge will not die because of my pride. Because, darling, pride goeth before the fall, and some falls are more spectacular than others." Chapter 4: The Summoning. The call came at 2 a.m. Sera was still in her office, reviewing contracts by lamplight, when her private line rang. Only 7 people in the world had that number, and 6 of them were asleep. "This is Sera. Miss Vale." The voice was crisp, professional, but she caught the slight tremor underneath. This is Marcus Green, beta of the Iron Ridge Pack. I'm calling to request a business meeting. Sera's grip tightened on the phone. After 10 years of silence, Iron Ridge wanted to talk business. How interesting. I don't take meetings at 2 a.m., Mr. Green. Ma'am, this is urgent. We're prepared to discuss exclusive licensing for your nano-silver technology. Sera leaned back in her chair, a cold smile playing at her lips. So they were desperate. Good. Licensing discussions start at 10 million, Mr. Green. If that's within your budget, have your alpha call me personally to arrange terms. She hung up before he could respond. 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. Seraphina. The voice was deeper, rougher, and sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine despite a decade of mental barriers. Alpha Voss. She kept her tone professionally cool. How unexpected. I need to see you. For words, but she heard everything underneath. The desperation he was trying to hide, the wounded pride, the fear for his pack. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the past 10 years were crumbling around her. Business hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. My assistant can schedule you an appointment. Seraphina. It's Sera now. And if you want my bullets, Alpha, you'll ask nicely. The silence stretched between them, loaded with history and hurt. Please, he said finally, and the words sounded like it had been dragged from somewhere deep. My pack is dying. Sera closed her eyes, hating the way that broken note in his voice still affected her. 10 years of building armor around her heart, and he could still find the cracks with a single word. Glass Tower, downtown. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Come alone. She disconnected the call and sat in the dark, staring out at the city lights. Tomorrow, she would see the man who'd destroyed her life. The man who'd made her stronger by breaking her. The man she'd built her entire empire to destroy. And if your heart is racing right now, just wait. Because we're about to witness the most delicious power reversal in werewolf history. Chapter 5, The Glass Tower. Sera spent the entire next day preparing like she was going to war. Because in a way, she was. The Argent Tower's top floor had been designed specifically for meetings like this. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city, bulletproof glass that could turn opaque at the touch of a button, and a conference table that had hosted negotiations worth billions. She chose her armor carefully, a charcoal Armani suit that cost more than most people's cars, Louboutin heels that added 4 inches to her height, and her father's silver wedding ring worn on her thumb as a reminder of real love versus fairy tale bullshit. At exactly 8 p.m., the elevator chimed. Kian Voss stepped into her domain, and Sera's carefully constructed composure wavered for just a moment. 10 years had been kind to him. He'd filled out from lanky young alpha to devastating man, his dark hair now threaded with silver at the temples, his storm gray eyes sharper and more haunted. He wore a black suit that probably cost as much as her dress, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, smell the exhaustion and worry beneath his expensive cologne. He was still beautiful. She hated that she noticed. Seraphina, he said, and she heard the slight catch in his voice when he looked at her. Sera, she corrected, moving to stand behind her desk instead of greeting him. Please sit. He remained standing, those gray eyes taking in everything, her office, her success, the woman she'd become. You look different, she supplied coolly. 10 years of excellent nutrition and personal trainers will do that. Powerful, he finished, and something in his tone made her look at him sharply. She touched her tablet, and the glass walls turned opaque, sealing them into privacy. You said your pack was dying. Explain. Kian pulled out a tablet and set it on her desk, photos of carnage filling the screen. Human militia, armed with military-grade silver ammunition. They've killed 12 of my wolves in the past month. Sera scrolled through the images, her expression neutral even as her stomach churned. She recognized her own technology in the wound patterns, the way the silver had bonded with tissue. These are definitely nano-silver rounds, she confirmed. Impressive work, actually. Most people can't afford this level of weaponry. Most people don't have government contracts, Kian said grimly. They're being funded by a shadow organization that wants all supernatural creatures eliminated. Sera looked up sharply. This was news to her, and she made it her business to know who bought her products. My ammunition is sold exclusively to legitimate law enforcement agencies for use against rogue supernaturals, she said. If someone is using it for genocide, they didn't get it through legal channels. Can you trace the serial numbers? I can trace anything I make. She pulled up her manufacturing database, fingers flying over the keyboard. These rounds, they're not mine. Kian's eyebrows rose. What? Someone reverse engineered my formula. Badly, too. This concentration would be agonizing for the victim. My formula is designed for clean kills, not torture. She felt genuine anger now. Someone was using her innovation to cause maximum suffering. So you'll help us? Hope crept into Kian's voice. Sera sat back in her chair, studying the man who'd once crushed her dreams in his palm. That depends entirely on what you're willing to pay. Money isn't an issue. I'm not talking about money, Kian. The use of his first name hung in the air between them. She saw him swallow hard, his knuckles white where they gripped the edge of her desk. What do you want? Sera smiled, and it was sharp as silver. An apology. Seraphina. A public apology. Televised. In front of your entire pack, acknowledging that you were wrong to reject me. Kian's face went pale. Public humiliation was the one thing alphas feared most. It could undermine their entire authority structure. And, Sera continued, you kneel when you give it. Gasps from the audience. Am I right? Because this is what revenge looks like when it's served ice cold and wearing designer heels. Chapter 6. The Price of Pride. Kian stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed her demand. She could practically see the war between his pride and his pack's survival playing out behind those storm-gray eyes. You want me to kneel? He said slowly. I want you to understand what it feels like to be powerless, Sera replied, her voice steady as stone. To have your worth determined by someone who sees you as beneath them. To be humiliated in front of everyone who matters to you. I was 22 and an idiot. You were cruel. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. You didn't just reject me, Kian. You destroyed me in front of 300 wolves. You made me a joke, a cautionary tale. Do you have any idea what my life became after that night? He flinched as if she'd struck him. Seraphina. I tried to kill myself. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Kian's face went white as paper. What? 3 days after the rejection. I couldn't handle the shame. The whispers, the way everyone looked at me like I was something pathetic. So I went to Mercy Falls with a bottle of silver nitrate. Sera's voice remained steady, clinical, but her hands trembled slightly as she remembered that night. The cold water, the burn of silver in her throat, the way the moonlight had looked so beautiful as her vision faded. My father found me, she continued, took me to a human hospital, away from pack lands. I spent 2 months learning to want to live again. And when I did, I decided that if I was going to survive in this world, I needed to become someone who could never be rejected again. Kian looked like he was going to be sick. I never knew. Because you never cared enough to find out. I was just an inconvenience to you, something to be discarded and forgotten. She stood, moving to the window to look out at the city lights. But here's the beautiful irony, Kian. Your rejection made me stronger than your acceptance ever could have. I built this empire on the foundation of my rage at you. Every patent, every contract, every billion in my accounts, it all exists because you taught me that power is the only thing that matters. And now you have it, he said quietly. Now I have it, she agreed. So, the question becomes, what am I going to do with it? She turned back to face him, and for a moment, the successful CEO mask slipped. He saw the girl she'd been, not weak, he realized now, but soft. Vulnerable. Full of hope and dreams he'd crushed without a second thought. Your pack is dying, she said softly. 12 wolves dead, 15 more wounded. How many children among them? His throat worked. 4. The youngest was 7. Something cracked in Sera's chest. She'd spent 10 years hardening her heart, but apparently, dead children could still break through her walls. "I'll save your pack," she said finally. "But not for you. For them. For the innocent wolves who don't deserve to pay for their alpha's mistakes." Relief flooded Kian's face. "Thank you. I'm not finished." Her voice cut through his gratitude like ice. "I'll provide you with 2 million rounds of legitimate nano-silver ammunition at cost. I'll also trace the source of the black market rounds and shut down their operation." "What's the catch?" Sera smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. "The public apology stands. On your knees, in front of your pack, acknowledging that you were wrong to reject me. It gets broadcast live to every supernatural news channel in North America." Kian's hands clenched into fists. "That kind of display of weakness, it could undermine my authority permanently. Then I guess you'll have to decide what matters more, your pride or your pack's lives." The ultimatum hung between them like a blade. Sera could see the exact moment when Kian's alpha instincts warred with his love for his people and loved one. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll do it." "Good. But there's one more condition." His laugh was bitter. "Of course there is. My ammunition requires a specific activation agent to reach full potency. Alpha saliva, to be precise. You'll need to stay here for 30 days while we produce your order, providing daily samples." Kian's eyes narrowed. "You want me here for a month? I want to make sure you don't conveniently disappear before fulfilling your end of our bargain. Consider it insurance." What she couldn't say, was that some part of her needed those 30 days. Needed to prove to herself that she was truly over him, that the scared 18-year-old who'd loved him was completely dead. 30 days to show him exactly who she'd become. 30 days to make him understand what he'd thrown away. 30 days to break his heart the way he'd broken hers. And, darling, if you think this is going to be a simple month of business transactions, you clearly haven't been paying attention to the way these two are looking at each other. Chapter 7. The Penthouse Prison. Sera's penthouse took up the entire top floor of the Argent Tower, a monument to wealth and taste that made Kian's pack house look like a log cabin. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the city. Modern art worth millions decorated the walls, and every surface gleamed with expensive minimalism. "Your room," Sera said, leading him to a guest suite that was larger than most people's entire homes. Kian set down his single bag and looked around the space. King-sized bed, marble bathroom, sitting area with its own fireplace. It was luxurious and cold as a tomb. "There's a catch, isn't there?" he asked. Sera's smile was sharp. "The full moon is in 2 weeks. I assume you'll need somewhere secure for your shift." She led him to the balcony, where a reinforced steel cage had been installed. It was large enough to house his wolf form, with temperature controls and a supply of fresh water, but it was still a cage. "You want me to shift in captivity," he said flatly. "I want you visible," she corrected. "The cage faces my bedroom window. Every month for 10 years, I've watched the moon that should have bound us together. I think it's time you experienced what it feels like to be the one behind bars." The symbolism wasn't lost on him. She'd lived in an emotional cage since their rejection. Now it was his turn to be literally imprisoned. "The meals are at 7, 1, and 8, she continued briskly. "My chef will accommodate any dietary needs. Business hours are 9 to 5, during which you'll report to Lab 7 for sample collection. The rest of your time is your own, though I'd appreciate it if you didn't wander the building unsupervised." "This is about more than ammunition," Kian said quietly. Sera paused at the door, not turning around. "This is about business, Alpha. Nothing more." But as she walked away, Kian caught her scent, and underneath the expensive perfume and the cold confidence, he smelled something that made his wolf whine with recognition. She still smelled like home. Oh, the lies we tell ourselves when our hearts are breaking all over again. Chapter 8. Breaking Points. Day 3 of Kian's stay began like the others. Alarm at 6 a.m., workout in Sera's private gym, breakfast at 7 sharp. But this morning, something was different. Sera wasn't at the table. She'd maintained perfect punctuality for their previous meals, arriving precisely on time in her business attire, making polite conversation about weather and stock prices while studiously ignoring the tension that crackled between them whenever they were in the same room. Kian found her in the kitchen, standing at the stove in silk pajamas and a robe, systematically burning what might have once been eggs. "Where's your chef?" he asked. "Sick." She didn't look at him, focused intently on scraping charcoal from the pan. Food poisoning, apparently. Kian moved closer, catching the scent of frustration and embarrassment she was trying to hide. "When's the last time you cooked for yourself?" "I don't cook. I have people for that." Clearly. He gently took the spatula from her hand, their fingers brushing. The contact sent electricity up his arm, and he saw her stiffen. "Let me." "I don't need." "Seraphina." His voice was soft, and the sound of her full name on his lips made her finally look at him. "Let me help." For a moment, her mask slipped, and he saw the exhaustion underneath. The woman who ran a billion-dollar empire, who held the fate of his pack in her hands, who'd built herself into a force of nature. She looked fragile in the morning light, young and uncertain in a way that reminded him painfully of the girl she'd been. "I used to cook for my mother," he said, moving to the refrigerator. "Before I became Alpha, before everything got so complicated. There's something peaceful about it." He pulled out ingredients with efficient movements, and soon the kitchen filled with the smell of actual food instead of smoke. Sera watched him work, and he was hyper-aware of her gaze on his hands, his shoulders, the way he moved through her space like he belonged there. "Why did you really reject me?" she asked suddenly. Kian's hands stilled on the omelet pan. He'd been dreading this question for 10 years. "You want the truth?" "I want to understand. I've spent a decade trying to figure out what was so wrong with me that you couldn't even give me a chance." He plated the eggs, buying time, then turned to face her. She deserved honesty, even if it destroyed him. "Because I was terrified." Sera blinked. "What?" "You were 18, Seraphina. Innocent. You looked at me like I hung the moon, like I was some kind of hero instead of a 22-year-old who had no idea what he was doing." Kian ran a hand through his hair, the words coming faster now. "I was about to become Alpha of one of the most dangerous territories in North America. I had enemies who would have used you against me, who would have hurt you to get to me. So you decided to hurt me first? I decided to keep you safe." The words came out harsh, raw. "I told myself it was better to break your heart cleanly than to let you get destroyed by the life I was walking into." Sera stared at him for a long moment. "That's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard." "I know. You took away my choice. You decided what was best for me without asking what I wanted." "I know. You destroyed me to save me?" "Yes." His voice cracked on the word, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. They stood in her kitchen, the morning light streaming between them, and for the first time in 10 years, Sera saw the man behind the Alpha mask. He looked as broken as she felt. "The worst part," she said softly, "is that I would have chosen you anyway. Dangerous life, enemies, all of it. I would have chosen you." Kian closed his eyes like she'd struck him. "I know that now. Too late for regrets, Alpha." "Is it?" He looked at her with such naked hope that it physically hurt. "Seraphina, is it really too late?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. The moment shattered as she read the message, her face going pale. "What is it?" "The hunters," she whispered. "They just hit another pack. 50 dead, including children." The intimacy of the morning evaporated as they both remembered why he was really here. This wasn't about second chances or healing old wounds. This was about survival. And just when you thought they might find their way back to each other, the real world comes crashing in. Because love stories are never simple when there's a war going on. Chapter 9. The Hunt Begins. The war room in Argent Tower rivaled most military installations. Wall-mounted screens displayed global supernatural activity, satellite feeds, and enough data to coordinate a small army. Which, Sera reflected grimly, was exactly what they were about to need. "The Crimson Falls Pack," she announced as Kian joined her, both of them now dressed for business. "Wiped out at 3 a.m. 57 confirmed dead, including 14 children." The photos on screen were brutal. Kian's face went ashen as he took in the carnage. Wolves cut down in their sleep by ammunition designed to cause maximum suffering. "This isn't random," he said. "They're targeting the strongest packs first, weakening supernatural resistance before moving to full extermination." Sera pulled up tactical analyses. Iron Ridge, Crimson Falls, Silver Creek, all major pack territories. "You're not just under attack, Kian. You're being systematically eliminated." Her fingers flew over keyboards, pulling data from sources both legal and decidedly not. "The ammunition used here isn't my black market knockoff. This is military grade, government contracted." Meaning this goes higher than some rogue militia group. This is sanctioned genocide. The weight of those words settled between them. They weren't just fighting hunters. They were fighting a war they hadn't known had been declared. "I can trace the serial numbers on this ammunition," Sera continued, "but I'll need to access government databases. The kind that tend to notice when you're poking around." "How long?" "6 hours if I'm lucky. 12 if I'm careful." Kian nodded grimly. "Do it. Whatever resources you need." Sera looked at him sharply. "This could expose my company to federal investigation. I could lose everything I've built. Why would you risk that?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Why would she risk her empire for wolves who'd never accepted her, led by a man who'd broken her heart? "Because," she said finally, "children are dying, and I may be a lot of things, Kian, but I'm not a monster." But even as she said it, something cold and calculating sparked in her eyes. Because Seraphina Vale hadn't built her empire by being merciful. Chapter 10: Digital Warfare. While Sera disappeared into the digital underground, tracking ammunition through layers of black market dealers and government shell companies, Kian found himself in unfamiliar territory, watching a war being fought with keyboards instead of claws. Her command center was a testament to controlled chaos. Multiple screens displayed code, financial records, shipping manifests, and encrypted communications. Sera moved between them like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of information. "Got something," she announced after 8 hours of relentless work. The ammunition trace leads to Blackwater Solutions, government contractor specializing in supernatural threat mitigation. Never heard of them, because they don't exist on paper. Shell company within a shell company, funded through black budget allocations. Sera's eyes were bright with the hunt. But here's where it gets interesting. They're not just buying ammunition. They're buying intelligence. She pulled up financial records that made Kian's blood run cold. Payments to pack members, substantial sums for information about patrol routes, safe houses, pup locations. "Someone inside the packs is selling information to the hunters," he said. "Multiple someones. This is coordinated betrayal on a massive scale." Kian felt his wolf rage beneath his skin. Bad enough to face enemies from outside, but to discover wolves selling out their own kind for human money. "Can you identify them? Give me another hour." Sera's fingers never stopped moving. But Kian, there's something else. The ultimate target isn't random packs. She brought up a new screen, architectural plans, security assessments, detailed intelligence reports. They're planning to hit the Grand Council. Kian's world tilted. The Grand Council represented every major pack in North America, scheduled to meet in 3 days for their annual assembly. If the hunters hit that gathering, it would decapitate supernatural leadership across the continent, he breathed. Over 300 alphas, betas, and council members in one location. They're planning to kill them all. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. This wasn't just about eliminating a few troublesome packs. This was about wiping out organized supernatural resistance entirely. "We have to warn them," Kian said. "With what proof?" "Illegally obtained financial records and hacked government communications." Sera shook her head. "They'll never believe it came from a human-owned weapons company. Half of them still think I'm working with the hunters." "Then we stop it ourselves." Sera turned to look at him, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she smiled with genuine respect. You didn't have to help," Kian said quietly. "You could have let my pack die and had your revenge. Instead, you're risking everything to save people who've never accepted you." Don't mistake practicality for heroism, Alpha. If the supernatural world falls, my company goes down with it. But her eyes said something different. Her eyes said she was finally fighting for something bigger than revenge. So, what's the plan? He asked. Sera's smile turned predatory. We're going to war, darling. And I intend to win. Because when a dragon decides to fight, the smart money isn't on the knights. Chapter 11. Silver Bullets and Last Stands. The Grand Council Assembly was held every year in the remote Cascade Mountains, a fortress-like compound designed to withstand supernatural threats. It had never been designed to withstand a coordinated human military assault. Sera and Kian arrived at the compound 12 hours before the attack was scheduled to begin, armed with evidence, ammunition, and a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. They'll never listen to me, Sera said as they approached the security checkpoint. I'm human, I manufacture weapons, and half of them think I'm profiteering off supernatural deaths. Then it's a good thing you're not going alone. Kian's presence beside her was both reassuring and complicated. 3 weeks of living in close quarters had done things to her carefully constructed walls. She'd watched him cook breakfast, seen him laugh at terrible movies, caught him reading poetry when he thought no one was looking. The monster she'd built in her mind kept refusing to match the man sleeping down the hall. The Grand Council chamber was exactly as intimidating as she'd imagined, carved from living rock, filled with the most powerful supernatural beings in North America. 300 pairs of eyes turned to watch as Kian escorted her to the center of the chamber. Alpha Voss, the chief elder's voice echoed off stone walls. You are not scheduled to address the council. Emergency session, Kian replied formally. I bring intelligence of an imminent threat to this assembly. Murmurs rippled through the gathered alphas. Sera caught fragments of conversation. Who's the human? Why is she here? Isn't that the weapons dealer? The threat assessment comes from Argent Armory, Kian announced, and the murmurs turned hostile. You bring our enemy to our most sacred gathering? Alpha Morrison of the Eastern Pax rose from his seat, his voice booming with outrage. I bring the woman who's about to save all your lives, Kian shot back. Sera stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos with quiet authority. In approximately 10 hours, this compound will be hit by a coordinated military assault. The attackers will be armed with military-grade nano-silver ammunition. They have detailed intelligence on your security protocols, and their goal is complete extermination of supernatural leadership. And why should we believe the human who makes the weapons killing our children? Alpha Morrison snarled. Sera met his gaze steadily. Because I'm the human who's going to help you kill the bastards using my weapons to commit genocide. She activated the holographic display system, filling the chamber with tactical data, financial records, intercepted communications. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The attack comes at dawn, she continued. 300 human soldiers, armed with weapons specifically designed to cause maximum casualties. They have inside information about your guard rotations, your evacuation protocols, your safe rooms. Someone in this room has been feeding them intelligence. The silence that followed was deafening. Prove it, Morrison demanded. Sera smiled coldly and activated another display. Bank records, communication logs, payment schedules. Alpha Morrison, did you enjoy spending your 30 pieces of silver? The chamber erupted. Morrison shifted partially, claws extending, but Kian was faster. He slammed the traitor Alpha against the stone wall, his own claws at Morrison's throat. How many? Kian's voice was deadly quiet. How many packs did you sell to the hunters? They promised immunity for my territory, Morrison gasped. Said they'd spare my pack if I cooperated. And you believed them? Sera's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. They're planning genocide, you idiot. When they're done with the others, what makes you think you'd be any different? More displays activated, showing the complete scope of the conspiracy. Morrison wasn't the only traitor. 7 alphas had been bought, their information used to target specific packs for elimination. The question now, Sera announced to the stunned assembly, is whether you want to die like sheep or fight like wolves. Because nothing quite says power move, like exposing traitors in front of 300 supernatural predators. Chapter 12. The War Council. What followed was controlled chaos. The traitor alphas were contained, though not without violence, and the Grand Council transformed from a political assembly into a war council in minutes. "We evacuate immediately," Elder Blackthorn declared. "Scatter to our territories, make ourselves impossible to target, and leave the hunters to pick us off one by one?" Kian countered. "They've been planning this for months. Running won't save us." "Then what do you propose?" Elder Ravencrest demanded. Sera stepped forward again, and this time, the hostility in the room had shifted to grudging attention. "We make our stand here. Turn their trap into ours." "Explain." "This compound has natural advantages, limited access points, defensible positions, underground bunkers. More importantly, they're expecting 300 terrified politicians, not 300 of the deadliest predators on the continent working together." She activated the tactical display, showing compound schematics overlaid with attack vectors and defensive positions. "I can neutralize their ammunition advantage. Standard nano-silver rounds are designed to be lethal to individual targets, but they have limitations. I can modify your existing weapons to fire countercharges that will destabilize the silver bonding on impact." "How long?" Elder Blackthorn asked. 4 hours for modifications, 2 hours for distribution and training. "That leaves us 4 hours before dawn," Kian noted. 4 hours to turn a massacre into a victory, Sera corrected. The vote was close, but desperation won over caution. They would make their stand at the compound. As the council dispersed to prepare, Elder Ravencrest approached Sera. "Why?" she asked simply. "You owe us nothing. Why risk your life for people who've treated you as an enemy?" Sera looked around the chamber, at wolves preparing to fight for their survival, at Kian coordinating defensive positions with quiet authority. "Because," she said softly, "someone has to be better than the monsters. And sometimes being better than the monsters means becoming something even more dangerous than they are." Chapter 13. Silver Dawn. The attack came with the first light of dawn, exactly as Sera's intelligence had predicted. 300 human soldiers in tactical gear, armed with enough firepower to level a small city, converging on the compound from all directions. They expected to find sleeping wolves. Instead, they found an army. Sera had spent the night turning the compound's armory into a weapons manufacturing facility, her modified ammunition distributed to every defender. The countercharges wouldn't neutralize the hunter's silver rounds completely, but they would reduce lethality by 60%, enough to give the supernatural defenders a fighting chance. She'd also done something else, something that made Kian's blood run cold when he discovered it. "You're not staying in the command center," he said, finding her strapping on tactical gear. "The modifications only work if someone who understands the technology can make real-time adjustments," Sera replied calmly. "I need to be in the field." "Absolutely not. This isn't a negotiation, Alpha." "Seraphina." His hands caught her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "You could die out there. People are already dying. Children have died. And I'll be damned if I let genocidal bastards win, because I was too comfortable to get my hands dirty." In her eyes, he saw the girl who'd sworn never to be powerless again. But he also saw something else, the woman who'd chosen to stand and fight instead of run and hide. "Then we fight together," he said. "Kian." "Together," he repeated firmly. "You watch my back, I watch yours." Before she could argue, explosions rocked the compound. The battle had begun. Because sometimes love isn't about pretty words and moonlight. Sometimes it's about standing back to back against impossible odds and refusing to let the darkness win. Chapter 14. Blood and Silver. The battle for the Grand Council compound was unlike anything in supernatural history. For the first time, werewolves fought alongside weapons technology instead of relying purely on claws and fangs. Sera moved through the combat zone like a deadly angel, her modified ammunition turning the tide wherever she appeared. But it was the sight of her and Kian fighting together that truly inspired the defenders. The rejected human and the Alpha who'd cast her aside, moving in perfect synchronization, each protecting the other with lethal efficiency. She provided covering fire while he closed for hand-to-hand combat. He shielded her while she made tactical adjustments to weapon systems. Northwest Corridor is compromised, she reported into her comm system, even as she put 3 rounds into an advancing soldier's chest. They're using shaped charges to breach the lower levels. On it, came Elder Blackthorn's response. The hunters had planned well, but they'd made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed that supernatural creatures would fight like animals instead of soldiers. The coordinated defense was systematically dismantling their assault. Sera, Kian's warning came just as a sniper's bullet took her in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her weapon flying. She hit the ground hard, silver fire racing through her system from the nano-silver round. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't potentially fatal, killed by her own technology, improved by her own innovations to be more lethal than ever. Kian's roar of rage echoed off the stone walls as he shifted mid-leap, his wolf form tearing the sniper apart in seconds. But more hunters were converging on their position, drawn by the scent of blood. "Can you move?" he asked, shifting back to human form and hauling her behind cover. "Give me a minute," she gasped, pressing her hand against the wound. The silver was burning through her system, but she was human. It would hurt like hell, but it wouldn't kill her the way it would a shifter. "We need to fall back to secondary positions," Kian said, but Sera shook her head.
"No.
We end this here." She pulled something from her tactical vest, a single silver bullet, but this one was different. Instead of a standard projectile design, it looked like a miniature work of art, etched with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. "What is that?" "The Luna bullet," she said. "I've been working on it for 10 years. A round design not to kill, but to disable silver-based weapon systems permanently."
"How?"
"Electromagnetic pulse triggered by silver-on-silver contact. One shot, and every nano-silver round within a half-mile radius becomes inert." Kian stared at her. "You could have led with that. Only one prototype. If I miss, you won't miss." The certainty in his voice steadied her more than any painkiller could have. Sera loaded the Luna bullet into her sidearm and took careful aim at the hunter's ammunition depot, visible through the shattered windows. One shot. Everything depended on one shot. She squeezed the trigger. And darling, if you're not holding your breath right now, you haven't been paying attention to the stakes. Chapter 15. The Luna Bullet. The Luna bullet struck the ammunition depot with a sound like breaking crystal, and the world exploded into silver fire. The electromagnetic pulse raced outward in concentric waves, and everywhere it touched, nano-silver rounds simply stopped. The carefully engineered molecular bonds that made them so lethal dissolved, reducing military-grade ammunition to harmless metal. The effect on the battle was immediate and devastating. Hunters who'd been advancing with confidence suddenly found their weapons useless, their technological advantage gone in an instant. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a rout. 300 supernatural predators, no longer facing lethal ammunition, tore through the remaining hunters with ruthless efficiency. The compound that was supposed to be a killing ground became a graveyard for those who'd planned genocide. Sera watched it all from Kian's arms, her vision swimming from blood loss, but her heart steady. The Luna bullet, 10 years of research, innovation, and carefully controlled rage, had worked perfectly. "It's over," Kian said softly, his voice full of wonder. "You did it. You stopped them." "We stopped them," she corrected weakly. "Together." Because even in victory, some truths are more important than individual glory.
Chapter 16. The Price of Victory. The aftermath of the Grand Council battle was chaos of a different kind. News crews, government investigators, supernatural rights activists. Everyone wanted a piece of the story about the human weapons manufacturer who'd saved werewolf civilization. Sera watched it all from her hospital bed, her shoulder immobilized but her mind sharp as ever. The bullet hadn't done permanent damage, but she'd lost enough blood to require a transfusion and several days of observation. "The Senate wants to hold hearings on supernatural weapons regulation," Kian reported, settling into the chair beside her bed. "The president wants to meet with you personally. And I told them they could get in line behind the 300 alphas who want to thank you personally." Sera laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at her stitches. That's going to be a long line. Worth it, though. His hand found hers, carefully avoiding the 4 lines. What you did, Seraphina, you saved our entire species. I saved children, she said simply. The rest was just good tactics. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the city gold through the hospital windows. So much had changed in just 30 days, not just between them but in the entire supernatural world. The public apology, Sera said suddenly. What about it? You still owe me one. Our deal was ammunition for a public apology, and while I provided the ammunition, Kian's laugh was rich and warm. You want me to kneel in front of the Grand Council? I want you to tell the truth. In front of everyone who matters, I want you to acknowledge that you were wrong. Seraphina. His voice was serious now, his gray eyes intense. I was more than wrong. I was an idiot, a coward, and the biggest fool in supernatural history. Go on, she said, but her voice was softer now. I rejected the most extraordinary woman I'd ever met because I was too scared to be worthy of her. I threw away a gift from the moon goddess herself because I thought I was protecting you, when really I was just protecting myself from the possibility of failure. His thumb traced over her knuckles, and she felt that familiar electric jolt of connection. You asked me once if it was too late for regrets, he continued. It's not too late for regrets, but maybe it's not too late for second chances either. Sera studied his face, older now, marked by responsibility and loss, but still heartbreakingly beautiful. Still the man who'd made her 18-year-old heart race with a single look. What are you asking me, Kian? I'm asking if a woman who's built an empire, who's saved my people, who's become everything I was too blind to see she always was. I'm asking if she might consider giving a reformed fool one more chance. And here we are, darlings. The moment you've all been waiting for. Chapter 17. Second Chances. Sera was quiet for so long that Kian began to wonder if he'd finally pushed too far. 10 years was a long time to carry hurt, and he'd given her plenty of reasons to walk away. You hurt me, she said finally. More than I thought it was possible to be hurt and still survive. I know. You made me feel worthless. Wanted. Like I was something to be ashamed of. I know, he repeated, his voice rough with self-hatred. And then you made me strong. Her amber eyes met his, and he saw steel underneath the softness. You made me realize that the only person whose opinion of me mattered was my own. Seraphina. I'm not the girl who loved you 10 years ago, she continued. That girl died the night you rejected her. I'm someone else now. Someone who doesn't need you, who doesn't need anyone. Kian's heart was breaking all over again. He'd destroyed the best thing in his life, and now he had to live with the consequences. But, Sera said, and the single word made him look up hopefully, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe what we need isn't to go back to what we were, but to discover what we could become. What are you saying? I'm saying that the woman I am now chooses you, Kian Voss. Not because the moon says we're mates, not because some ancient magic decided our fate, but because I've seen who you really are underneath the alpha mask. I choose the man who cooks terrible breakfasts and reads poetry when he thinks no one's looking. I choose the leader who'd risk everything to save his people, who'd kneel before his enemies to protect the innocent. Tears were streaming down Kian's face now, 10 years of regret and hope and desperate love finally finding an outlet. I choose you too, he whispered. Not because you're my fated mate, but because you're the strongest, most brilliant, most beautiful person I've ever known. I choose the woman who built an empire on pure determination, who risked everything to save people who'd never accepted her. Sera reached up with her good arm and pulled him down until their foreheads touched, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. So where does that leave us? She asked. Wherever we want to be, he said. No prophecies, no fated bonds, no pack politics. Just us making our own choices. I like the sound of that. When he kissed her, it wasn't with the desperate passion of teenagers or the bitter heat of revenge. It was with the steady warmth of two people who'd found their way back to each other through darkness and choice and the simple decision to be brave. And if you're crying right now, don't worry. I am too. Because some love stories are worth waiting 10 years for. Chapter 18. New Beginnings. 6 months later, the merger between Argent Armory and Iron Ridge Pack was the business story of the decade. Sera maintained her position as CEO, But now the company operated under joint supernatural human leadership, with Kian serving as Director of Supernatural Affairs. The new model was revolutionary, weapons designed not just to kill but to protect. Technology that could distinguish between rogue threats and innocent supernaturals. Ammunition that could subdue without destroying, contain without killing. The UN wants to license our non-lethal silver rounds for global peacekeeping, Sera announced, entering their shared office with a stack of contracts. And Kian looked up from his own paperwork. Coordination between pact territories and human law enforcement was more complex than anyone had imagined. I told them we'd consider it, but our first priority remains protecting supernatural communities. Good. He stood and crossed to her, his arms settling around her waist with familiar ease. How's the new facility coming along? Ahead of schedule. We'll be able to start training the first mixed human-supernatural security teams next month. The Luna Argent Training Center was Sera's newest project. A place where humans and supernaturals could learn to work together instead of against each other. It was ambitious, revolutionary, and absolutely in keeping with the woman who'd decided that saving the world was just another business opportunity. Speaking of new beginnings, Kian said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, I have something for you. Sera raised an eyebrow. If this is another attempt to get me to move in with you. It's not. He pulled a small velvet box from his desk drawer and Sera's breath caught. Though I'm not giving up on that either. Kian. It's not what you think, he said quickly. Open it. Inside the box wasn't a ring, it was a bullet. But this one was unlike any she'd ever seen, crafted from what looked like white gold and silver, etched with symbols that seemed to glow with their own inner light. A Luna bullet, she whispered. Made from the fragments of our original bond stone, Kian said. I kept the pieces all these years. I don't know why, guilt maybe, or hope I didn't want to acknowledge. Sera lifted the bullet from its velvet bed, marveling at the craftsmanship. What's it for? Whatever we want it to be. A symbol of second chances, maybe. Or a reminder that sometimes the most broken things can be made into something beautiful. I love it, she said and meant it. But Kian, you know I don't need grand gestures, right? I don't need you to prove anything. I know, but I want to. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice in giving me another chance. Sera set the bullet carefully back in its box and turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. You already have, you idiot. Every day in 100 small ways, you prove that we're right together. When he kissed her this time, it was with the easy affection of two people who'd found their rhythm, who'd learned to fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had always been meant to connect. Because the best love stories aren't about grand gestures and dramatic declarations. They're about choosing each other over and over again, in all the small moments that make up a life. Chapter 19. The Blood Moon Returns. 1 year later, the blood moon rose over the Iron Ridge territory for the first time since Sera's rejection. But now, instead of a ceremony of pain and humiliation, it was a celebration of choice and triumph. The pack had accepted Sera not because she was their alpha's mate, but because she'd proven herself worthy of their respect. She'd saved not just Iron Ridge but the entire supernatural world. More importantly, she'd shown them that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful wolves were the ones who chose to fight with their minds instead of their claws. Nervous? Kian asked, adjusting his formal wear as they prepared for the ceremony. Should I be? Sera smoothed her dress. Not white because she wasn't a virgin bride, but silver because she was a woman who'd claimed her own power. It's not like we haven't been living as mates for months. No, but this makes it official. Pack recognition, supernatural law, the whole thing. Good thing I like being official. The ceremony was beautiful in a way that their first encounter under the blood moon never could have been. This time, when they stood before the elder with the new bond stone, it wasn't about fate or prophecy or ancient magic. It was about choice. Do you, Kian Voss, choose Seraphina Vale as your mate, your equal, your partner in all things? I do, Kian said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ceremonial ground. Not because the moon demands it, but because my heart does. And do you, Seraphina Vale, choose Kian Voss as your mate, your equal, your partner in all things? Sera looked out at the gathered pack wolves who'd once whispered about the weak little girl who'd been rejected by their alpha. Now they watched her with respect, admiration, and genuine affection. I do, she said clearly. Because love isn't about being chosen by someone else. It's about choosing yourself and then choosing to share that self with someone worthy of the gift. When they pressed their hands to the bond stone together, it blazed not with silver fire, but with gold, the color of sunlight, of new beginnings, of two people who'd found their way to each other through darkness and determination. The pack erupted in celebration, but Sera and Kian only had eyes for each other. "So," he said, pulling her close as the golden light faded, "what's next for the power couple of the supernatural world?" Sera's smile was brilliant and sharp and full of possibilities. "World domination, obviously. I hear the vampire courts are interested in non-lethal weaponry. And after that?" "After that," she said, her voice soft with wonder and promise, "we see what happens when two people who've learned to be strong alone decide to be even stronger together." And they lived powerfully, passionately, and completely on their own terms ever after. 5 years later, the Argent Voss Foundation had become the most influential supernatural rights organization in the world, with chapters in 37 countries and a budget that rivaled small nations. Their work in developing non-lethal restraint technology had revolutionized law enforcement. Their educational programs had created the first generation of humans and supernaturals trained to work together, and their legal advocacy had resulted in landmark civil rights legislation. But perhaps their greatest achievement was simpler than all of that. Sera stood in the nursery of their home, not the penthouse apartment or the pack house, but a place they'd built together, designed for a family they'd created by choice rather than chance. 2 cribs sat side by side, and the babies sleeping in them were the most beautiful thing either parent had ever seen. "Luna's heartbeat is definitely wolf," Kian said softly, his finger tracing the sleeping girl's tiny hand. "But Marcus, I think he's human." "Does it matter?" Sera asked, settling into the rocking chair with their son. The boy had her amber eyes and his father's stubborn chin, and she loved him with a fierceness that still surprised her. "Not even a little bit," Kian assured her. "Wolf, human, or something entirely new, they're ours." "They're themselves," Sera corrected. "And when they're old enough, they'll choose who they want to become." Because that was the lesson they'd learned, the truth they'd fought for and won. That the most important choice anyone could make was the choice to be themselves, completely and without apology. The twins stirred and Sera began to hum, not a lullaby, but the melody that had been playing the night she'd decided to build her empire. The night she'd chosen strength over surrender, power over pity. The night she'd begun the journey that led to this moment, this family, this life she'd claimed for herself through determination and courage and the simple refusal to let anyone else define her worth. And if that isn't a happily ever after worth fighting for, I don't know what is. And that, darlings, is how a rejected Luna becomes a queen, not through magic or fate or ancient prophecies, but through the simple decision to never let anyone else determine her value. Sera Vale started as a broken 18-year-old girl who believed her worth was tied to a man's acceptance. She became a woman who understood that the only acceptance that mattered was her own, and that real power came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt rejected, overlooked, or told you weren't enough, I want you to remember Sera's journey. Because your worth isn't determined by who chooses you. It's determined by who you choose to become. Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we've got so many more stories of powerful women rewriting their destinies. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Sera's position? Would you have helped the pack that rejected you, or would you have watched it burn? And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's been made to feel small or unwanted or not enough, share this with them. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we all have the strength to rise from our own ashes. Next week, we're diving into the story of a vampire queen who faked her own death to escape an arranged marriage, only to return as the most powerful necromancer in supernatural history. You won't want to miss the Dead Queen's revenge. Until then, remember, you are not the opinion of someone who doesn't know your value. You are not the rejection of someone too blind to see your worth. You are the author of your own story, and it's time to write yourself a happy ending. Sweet dreams, and may your revenge always be served ice cold and wearing designer heels.